Assalamu alaikum and very good evening. First, let me introduce you. My name is Siti Maryam Atikah binti Abdul Malik. I am final year nutrition student with matric number 135114. Today, I would like to present you my final year project with title Nutritional Status and its Association with Quality of Life of Non-Government Institutionalized Elderly at Churchtown, Penang under supervision Associate Professor Dr. Rohana binti Abdul Jalil. A simple background of my study. Aging population phenomenon occurs worldwide, both in developing and developed countries. Malaysia also experiencing this demographic transition. Malaysia life expectancy had increased by 20 years over the last 6 decades, from 54.3 years in 1957 to 74.75 years in 2016, stated by the Department of Statistics Malaysia 2015. Thus, Malaysia is now projected to experiencing number of elderly, and this will demand special attention in order for them to age successfully and gain better quality of life. And this situation lead to an increased demand of old folks home. Here is some of my problem statement. First, malnutrition or nutritional risk is always found in elderly individuals. Next, there is an increasing number of evidence that indicate malnutrition in aging population lead to poor quality of life. Third, the extreme condition of malnutrition will cause the loss of muscle mass and muscle strength and thus decrease the functional condition and have lower quality of life. The main objective of my study is to assess the nutritional status and its association with quality of life of non-government institutionalized elderly at Churchtown, Penang. There are four specific objectives of my study. First, to evaluate the nutritional status among elderly. Second, to assess the quality of life of elderly. Third, to determine the dietary intake of elderly, and lastly, to identify the associate factor which contribute to quality of life among elderly in non-government institutions at Churchtown, Penang. Next, the null hypothesis of my study, there is no association between nutritional status, dietary intake, length of stay, and other socio-economic factors with the quality of life of non-government institutionalized elderly at Georgetown, Penang. The significance of my study, there are a lot of study regarding elderly and health status, but none of the study investigating into quality of life and nutritional status in elderly in non-government institution in Malaysia. Most of the study were conducted in community dwelling elderly, but not in a structured institution either in government or non-government institution setting. This is the conceptual framework of my study. The elderly living in non-governmental institution is a sample population. The socio-demographic factor, nutritional status, dietary intake, and length of stay is my independent variables, whereas quality of life is the dependent variable of my study. This is some of my literature review which I am focused on nutritional status, dietary intake, quality of life, length of stay, and institutionalized elderly as stated in the slide. Move to the methodology part. My research design is a cross-sectional study design. The population is the elderly residing in non-government institution. The location of my study, there are 5 selected of non-government institutionalized elderly at Georgetown, Penang. My sample size is 173 number of participants and I'm using systematic random sampling method to choose the participants. The eligibility criteria of my study is the inclusion criteria. The elderly must age 60 years and above, able to understand and speak in either Bahasa or English, as face-to-face interview will be conducted. Next, residing in the institution for at least 3 months due to adaptation of the environment and eating habit in the institution. Whereas for the exclusion criteria, elderly with impaired visual and hearing function who has been confirmed by the supervisors at the institution. Next, the bedridden elderly due to anthropometric measurement technique to be implemented. And lastly, elderly that who are not able to recall their past for 24-hour food intake due to dementia or loss of memory were not included. I'm using questionnaire to collect the data. The questionnaire consists of several parts such as consent form, socio-demographic information, mini-nutritional assessment, SF-36 questionnaire, anthropometric measurement, and 24-hour diet recall. The data collection goes as stated in the chart. Next, the result and discussion part. Based on socio-demographic characteristics, first, the gender. Most of the elderly stay in institution are female with 63%, which equivalent to 109 compared to male with 37% only. Whereas based on races or ethnicity, Chinese is the highest ethnic that stay in old folks home, followed by Indians and Malay. Same goes for the marital status. The married elderly is slightly higher than single and widowed. Based on the number of children, most of the elderly does not have children to depend on. And based on duration of stay by years, it shows that most of the elderly stay more than 1 to 5 years in institution. And for the health status, most of the elderly had heart disease and hypertension, and most of them had non-communicable diseases. Based on body composition with circumferences, it shows that 82.1% of respondents were at higher risk for type 2 diabetes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and heart disease, while only 17.9% of respondents with normal waist circumferences. Whereas for the BMI, body mass index, it shows that the prevalence of normal weight, overweight, and underweight were 59.5%, 25.4%, and 15% respectively. And based on the nutritional status, it shows that 49% of elderly were at risk of malnutrition, 32.9% are malnourished, and while only 17.3% of elderly were normal nourished. And based on the quality of life of elderly in institution at Georgetown, Penang, it shows that 53.2% of older people were at low of quality of life and 46.8% were having high quality of life. Next, for the association of socio-demographic factors and quality of life among respondents, it shows that female have low quality of life with 37.6% compared to male. And based on health status, elderly with more than one chronic disease have 34.7% low quality of life. Next, the association of body composition and nutritional status. It shows that BMI and mini nutritional assessment, which is the nutritional status of elderly, have significant relationship with the quality of life as the p-value is less than 0.05. As conclusion, the majority of the elderly had low nutritional status with low quality of life in non-government institutionalized elderly at Georgetown, Penang. The result shows that 52% respondents were at risk of malnutrition and malnutrition status. This study had found that the gender, BMI, and nutritional status do have relationship with the quality of life among institutionalized elderly at Georgetown, Penang. The limitation of my study is the way to gather the participant and it's hard to get their full cooperation. Next, the communication problem as well as few institutions are not willing to reveal their meal preparation due to the food quality being served in the institution. The recommendation for future study, they should recruit diversity ethnic group respondent and from bigger sample size to generate better representativeness of sample. This is the references of mine and thank you for lending me your ears.